Hello.
Hello. Hi.
How are ya?
Oh, hanging in there,
That's
hanging in
good.
there. How are you?
I'm also hanging in there. It's been a time
It
for like
it
6
has
months.
been, and it shouldn't be a time.
Hello and welcome back to the Fic List Presents Author's Notes, an interview series where I chat with creative type people about their experiences in and relationships to fandom and fan culture. My name is Erin, and I'm a 20-year veteran of the fandom trenches and a former professional arts administrator with an interest in bridging the gaps between creators and fandom. In today's episode, I am thrilled to welcome anti racism and anti oppression specialist, talent acquisition manager, director, dramaturg, playwright, and occasional actor, an all around lovely human, Jon Jon Johnson. Hi, Jon Jon.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. It is a delight to see you. I have not seen you since we worked on a show many a year ago at a children's theater that will go unnamed. Yeah, the people have heard the stories, so I don't like naming it.
Oh, that's fair. I have some tales to tell from that production.
Oh, I'm
But
sure we can talk about them
yeah,
offline because I remember that show.
yeah.
Yeah,
What a wild time that was.
what a time. The thing that I remember from that show, and one of the reasons I was like, oh, I really would love to talk to Jon Jon, just sort of in general, and one of the things that I sort of take away from having known you briefly in that time, we used to do sensory friendly productions of all of the shows that we did. So they were specifically like autism friendly performances, but really any child with any disability was particularly welcome to this production, and it was made to be sort of a gentler experience, a little bit more sensory oriented. There were break spaces and the lights stayed on, and we took out some of the more sharp sounds, things like that. And
Mhm.
I remember, like, some actors get it, some don't. And that's a whole conversation to be had for another day. But I remember distinctly you being so wonderful to work with in that conversation and being probably my favorite person to do a sensory friendly rehearsal with because you were
Yeah.
so down for it all. Because you were so down for it all and so open and being like, yeah, hell yeah, we're gonna do it. It's gonna be great. What if I do this other thing? What if I like come out and do my little thing, but I do it this way instead? And so that was the thing that sort of stuck with me about you.
I mean, I think accessibility is so important and like especially for theater, which is I have a lot of opinions about it, but like is determined to be inaccessible. Like someone was telling me recently about a production by a famous director who should not be named, who was like, we need to really adhere to a 10-minute intermission. And like everyone who was still in the bathroom or still getting their drinks, like got left out of the second act because the
Yikes.
staff was like instructed to really honor a tight 10. And I was like, that's so stupid.
That's dumb for a number of reasons. Like I can
Yeah.
list
And
even non-accessibility reasons why that's a bad idea.
yeah, but it's like that was just the most recent thing in memory here. And I was just like, why? Like, as an artist, I'm like, my vision is never so important that it's going to curtail your bathroom break, of which there is a line. Like, people got needs, you know? So,
For real.
and like, so yeah, I don't know. I'm like, that's the reason why streaming services are so popular, because, in my opinion, right? Because it's like you can engage with them at your leisure, and there's something that theater lacks in that world,
Yeah.
which is fascinating.
Yeah. We could go on a whole tangent right now, but maybe we
It's
should start
true.
maybe we should start with an introduction and then we can dive into it because
Oh,
I'm
right.
already.
Hi, who am I?
So, yeah,
Um,
if you wouldn't mind for the folks at home giving a little introduction of who you are, what you do, that kind of thing.
yeah. Hi, folks at home. I am, as aforementioned, Jon Jon Johnson. I work primarily in the theater industry, but have touched a couple different fields, such as like international development, public health, public policy. And I have, when I say an anti-racism, anti-oppression specialist, I have brought very specific, like, thought partnership and policy partnership to organizations who want to be more anti-racist or anti-oppressive. So I will do workshops on, like, I've done stuff on, like, mission statement or how to be more anti-racist in your work and the intentionality behind it. What is the intersectionality behind anti-racism? And say like gender or levels of ability, neurodivergence, etc., and how do those all coexist properly within a space to build what a term I have borrowed and really lived is like how to build brave and accountable spaces. Whereas it's like there is no world in which you can make a creative space safe because there is so much chaos happening where it's like there's a creative milieu occurring, right? And we're not always thinking like I think we spend so much time being like, well, if we make sure everyone's safe, then there's not as much room for that sort of brave exploration of material. So like how to build an accountable space, that is to say, like, hey, hurt's gonna happen. How do we make sure that when it occurs, we're able to take care of you in such a way that you are not like irrevocably harmed by the process? And you can imagine a lot of my thoughts from that began springing up on the show we worked on together.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense.
yeah, that was sort of one of the not inciting seeds, but it was a big seed for where that train of thought eventually crystallized into like, right, like how do we like hurt's gonna happen because we're all focused on doing our job. So how do we make sure we're actually taking care of each other instead of saying, oh, well, I didn't mean to do it, so therefore I cannot be held accountable for my intent, you know?
Right.
And so that is where I am sort of getting into the nitty-gritty of what does it actually mean to be anti-racist? I was just talking with someone earlier today about, critical race theory. And I was like, I haven't read all of it because that shit is so dense. But I was like, one of my biggest takeaways is that racism isn't evil per se, it is ordinary. And so, like, it is every day. So, how do we find it and combat it and challenge it where it is? And so, that's a lot of my work as a consultant. And then I do a lot of other work. I do too much,
Much
one
like
might say.
any artist, you wear many, many hats.
Yeah, too many hats and not enough anything else. So one of
So
the hats
true.
I'm working on is like self-care hat to make sure I'm taking care of myself in these increasingly frustrating times.
Yeah, totally. I think I've spoken a little bit about this on the podcast. I recently decided I was like, screw it, and got a day job that has nothing to do with creative work at all. And it has been the most creative, fulfilling thing that I could have possibly done. And that doesn't work for everybody. I know some people, it's like they have to work at a theater, or they have to work somewhere. For me, like I have learned that I really thrive in the separation of those things. So the self care hat is
Mhm.
very real.
I was thinking about that too, because my most recent job was at a very large theatrical institution.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew because I was between this job and another job that was very separate from the arts industry. And I ultimately chose to go into the arts industry because I think that's just where my people are. And I think those are the people I understand the most and want to support the most. So that was an easy decision. But I knew going into it that it was going to eat up a lot of my creative energy, and my love for theater is going to go into that aspect of the work, leaving me with a lot less of the bandwidth for theater afterwards. So, like, I got so many like comp tickets to go see shows, and I was like, nah, I'm going
Mm,
home. I'm going
that's the
home to my
worst.
cat. Like,
Yeah.
I've spent the past 8 hours in a theater. I don't want to spend another three, you
Yeah.
know? So,
Oh, absolutely. Totally.
yeah.
I think I had a point. It's gone now.
Oh,
I was going to say something. This is going to
that's okay.
happen.
We can let the thoughts roam free. They'll return to us at
I
some point, I'm sure.
I love that plan. I have to decide, like, that post COVID, my memory is shit. Like, it's just so bad now because, like, it's the thing that stuck with my brain after the first time I had COVID.
Mm.
So every once in a while, I'm like, there was something in my
There was
brain.
a fascinating study recently on audience retention post major COVID. Well, rather, they were like, since 2020, the audience retention has gone down, right?
Yeah.
They were like, memories are worse, and audience remembering things is not as good. And I raised my hand. I was like, does that have anything to do with COVID and lack of protections?
Mm,
Because there is a very like visible link between repeated COVID infections and mental decline
right. And trauma.
and trauma. And so I was like, so of course memory is going to go, and we're not being very forgiving of it, and we're also not encouraging like theaters to protect one another and our people. So,
Yeah.
but then I was told, how do they respond to that? What an excellent provocation, they said, and then moved on.
Oh, the arts world. Yeah. I think the point that it came back to me, I was going to say that, yeah, to your point about running out of emotional bandwidth at the end of the day when you're working in a creative field, like, if it works for you to work in the creative industries, I love that for you. And I think you should at least give it a try if that's something that you're interested in. But I think more and more people are seeing the value in the balance of both.
And as a nonprofit recruiter, right, as someone who does that talent acquisition,
Yeah.
I want to say like I think there's a lot of merit for finding an organization that has a mission that you vibe with, because I think therein is your sense of like alignment to its values. So like working at a theater is great if you're a theater person, but it's also at the same time like you have other things you care about. And I think there are plenty of places that you can send that sort of administrative workforce labor into and then have that like separate pot. Because I think what was it? I've also been ruminating a lot on the phrase like to be a good artist, you have to live an interesting life, right? If you
Yeah,
spend all day at theater, your work, you're just thinking about theater and little else, and you don't quite have the sort of varied life experience that I think makes it more interesting, right?
totally.
Like, I don't know how else to say that. Just like, I don't know. I wrote so many little plays and short stories because of things that my coworkers had said or did that were like inspirations. Whereas when I'm in the theater, I'm like, whatever, it's theater people, don't care, right?
Right.
So,
So, looping back around a little bit, going trying to get on. We could go off on this, and we could just chat for the next 3 hours, and
we
I would love
we
every
truly
second of
could.
it. But I made this really lovely outline that we're gonna.
I want to follow it.
Yeah, me too. So, my question, this is one of my sort of favorite questions to ask because it was born out of a conversation that me and Alan had in a previous episode with the author Chuck Tingle, where we learned that not everybody has the same definition or experience of fandom. So it is helpful to ask, how would you personally define or describe fandom for yourself?
So when I think about fandom, I think the first things that come to mind are like kingdom and Christendom, right? Where it is like those are the words that always stick out with the dom at the end. Like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do my research, but it's like it implies a sense of domain.
Mm-hmm.
This is the domain of the king, or this is the domain of Christians and Christ. And so fandom is like the domain of fans. It is like the in this day and age, like a more of a digital space in which people can exist, and I think the hope is to find community over a shared interest. So fandom is a way of, I think, engaging with a property, a media property or a thing, and finding other people who like the same thing. I have followed people on formerly X and this and making the move to Blue Sky, on Blue Sky being like, I'm going to follow a bunch of people who just like the same things I do because then their content's going to pop up on my feed from time to time. And, I'll feed it to myself like little morsels as I go throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I think fandom is just a way of engaging with the material. And I think the funny thing is that it makes amateur dramaturgs of us all because it is a way in which we engage critically with the piece.
Speaking of, dramaturgy may not be a super familiar word or discipline to the folks at home, even if they are creatives. Would you mind taking a second just to describe what a dramaturg does and how it may or may not intersect with fandom?
Yeah, so it depends on what role the dramaturg is called to do. The dramaturgy work I have done has typically been in new work development, or so to say, I will read the play of the playwright and say, like, hey, this is what I'm getting from it. These are the things I'm noticing. You're making some links here. And it's my job to point out everything that I'm absorbing from the material they put down and to help the playwright manage their statements. Because it's like, hey, you've written this, like, very scathing anti-war piece, and yet you have a character that actually I think I resonate deeply with, who is like super like pro-war. You know what I mean? Like that's a small example, being like, I don't know if that's what you want in this moment, but if it is, let's talk about it. And if it isn't, we should talk about it and have robust discussions. And dissecting the sort of meaning and statements and imagery and everything that occurs in a script or a piece of writing. There's also like the same work done for a director for an already established piece, being like, hey, a major theme, as we discussed, is found family, but the way you've staged this scene sort of implies that there is no familial or any sort of bond between these characters whatsoever. And like trying to make sure that those statements are in line. That's how I view my dramaturgy work, as someone who sits there and asks questions like, but did you mean that? And then
Was this intentional?
yeah, was this an intentional choice, or is this something that, you didn't realize happened? So I think dramaturgs are valuable. And how does it intersect with fandom? I think, like I said, every fan becomes, in a way, a little bit of a dramaturg. Because, you look at the age-old days of Tumblr, right? And it's like, look at people like seeking the meaning within a work because they sensed a resonance in it. So they investigate it and they dig into it and go, oh, there is a meaning here that either the author intended or I'm ascribing to, but this is what I feel in the moment. And this moment here, this line speaks to me in these ways. And then you go through and you find people who do all the like the historical or mythological research who are like, oh, this line actually has such a deeper meaning because of this historical context. And like, so a dramaturg in the rehearsal room can also bring that level of research to say like, oh, like what's it like, what was it? It was like working on a Japanese play, and it's like the character who's clearly like enamored with another character says like, "Oh, the moon's really beautiful tonight," right? And it seems innocuous, and it seems like, oh, they're trying not to express their feelings for the other person. And then the dramaturg comes in and says, actually, that is them expressing attraction to the other person. And these are the typically the like three responses you could use to sort of respond to it without saying, I like you too. And so the fact that the other character didn't respond with any of them is telling, you know? And so like that's the work of a dramaturg to unpack cultural, historical context for every line in the play, basically to say like this might be rife with subtext or it might be exactly what they're saying. And so when you look at fandom, you think about I think some shows that are written like more directly where you can kind of get the meaning from it, whereas there are other shows where it's like it's so juicy with subtext that we were like, what does that mean? Why did they say that in that moment, you know?
Yeah.
And it could be everything from like, oh, the author had a very specific intention behind that, or the editor like cut it too quickly and we're like, oh, now we've ascribed meaning to it. Because
Yeah.
that's what human brains do. We ascribe narrative to everything.
Yeah. I think about that a lot with fandom and how fans ascribe meaning to certain things that I don't think creators like the if you go back to all the way back to a writer, there are so many choices between writer and the thing on screen or the thing wherever it is produced that
Mhm.
like to figure out what was intentional and what wasn't is like half the fun of meta analysis.
Yeah. I mean, I was just talking with some friends earlier about Tolkien, and
Mm-hmm.
specifically like, we're like, okay, well, like some of the words we read there, we are a little bit appalled by now in our time,
Sure.
right? I think we were specifically looking at the phrase mongoloid
Yeah.
with regards to the orc, and we were like, did Tolkien mean it as a racism? Like, likely not, because that was just accepted nomenclature at the time.
Right.
So like there is the lens through which the author wrote it. There's also the lens through which we, years, decades in the future, are consuming it.
Mm-hmm.
And there will be a level of translation that we can or cannot do. Like we can choose to accept it as a product of its time and forgive it, give it that grace, or it can be like, actually, I don't want to engage with this because this is, upsetting because it is a viewpoint that is now sort of frozen in time.
Right. So, what is your background with regards to fandom? Like, did you grow up feeling like you were part of specific fandoms? Do you participate in fandom now? Like, is there anything that you would consider yourself in the fandom of?
Yeah, my relationship with fandom has been, I guess, like not rocky, but like a sine wave almost. Because like I
Interesting.
remember I kind of came up with, I think I remember very strongly like coming home from school and like doing my homework, and then around like 6 o'clock, I could put on Fox and watch The Simpsons, you
Oh.
know. And then I would just leave it on while I watched Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune,
Mm-hmm.
right? While I continued my homework. But I remember, like this was in the sort of golden era of Disney VHS tapes coming out, and like and then one of my treasure was like a three set VHS of the original Star Wars trilogy.
Ooh.
And this is when I realized, I think, looking back, that I was like, oh, I kind of was in the fandom, even though I didn't quite have the community around it, right?
Right.
Because I was not so, glued to my computer as I am these days.
Mm-hmm.
But like I wrote Star Wars like self-insert fan fiction as a kid,
Nice. Yeah.
and I remember very fondly I wrote one that was like, what if Star Wars, but what if all the characters from Balto? Right?
Wow. Wait.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I'm so like
Yes.
proud of this. Like I cringe a little bit at the thought being like I wrote furry fan fiction without knowing what a furry was at the time, but I was like, right, I really loved the characters in Balto so much that and I really love Star Wars and my little burgeoning creative brain was like, but what if we mash them up, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit of the essence of fandom. I
Hmm.
look at Tumblr posts and tweets and skeets of people being like, okay, but these two characters from these two completely separate universes would be best friends, and here's why. In this essay, I will,
Totally.
and
Yeah.
that's the sort of joy of fandom is that I think it's a creative way to engage with materials and properties and shows and books and media that it's like, okay, this is where I guess a little bit of the death of the author occurs, where it's like, this is what you intended, but here's what I'm going to take from it.
Yeah.
And
Completely.
I also want to say, like, as a queer, right? Like, fandom is very important because so many characters are not written to be overtly like homosexual or bisexual or lesbian or trans, but like as a queer person who has been trained to look for those details, being like, oh, that character resonates with me in a very queer way because of XYZ things. From as simple as that actor doesn't know how to sit in chairs, therefore this character is bisexual, to like,
Right.
oh man, like the way, like, what was that? There's one beautiful essay that's like, Bucky Barnes of the MCU is placed in the damsel in distress chair, like in that role, and
Hmm.
is like the emotional center of Steve Rogers' universe.
Right.
Therefore, this is queer.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's incredibly queer. Even if they never actually like smooch on screen or say I love you, like their love is palpable. And it's like, and that's the thing, even if it's not romantic, it's still queer to me because of, how it's not typically portrayed. So like that with that dramaturg you had on with that fandom hat, like I think ships are I think are sort of a pinnacle of fandom where it's like we're gonna read so much between the lines and we're gonna find all the clues to support our thesis. It's the thing that all of our English teachers wanted us to do, but we do it for fun now,
Right.
right?
We decided we were like, we're not going to do that about the Shakespeare. Maybe we might do it about the Shakespeare, but we
We
are
might.
we are going to do it about Bucky Barnes. And
Yeah,
I
who
think
is
that's
incredibly
real.
Shakespearean tragic.
Oh, totally. Like
Yeah.
deeply. I think a couple of things come to mind. One, I have a similar sort of fandom experience where before I ever knew what fan fiction was or that there was such a thing as fandom, I wrote self-insert Newsies fan fiction,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I framed it as a novel that's set in the same era that was just loosely inspired by LOL. But it was one of those things that I started doing just on my own without knowing that that was a thing that people do. So I think there's this really cool thing that happens where we've taken this sort of natural impulse to like riff and create on things that we love, this really like instinctual storytelling thing, and turned it into like community in ways that have sort of kept up with the times in a way. Like
Yeah.
the sort of sitting around the campfire like riffing on each other has now become Tumblr. Like I think that's really
Yeah.
cool. um, and then also as a queer person, fan fiction is what sort of opened my eyes to the fact that I'm ace. Like
Mm.
it was one of the ways that I was like, oh, that like whatever
Yeah.
that is, that's this one. And that I think can be a huge thing, especially for queer people, especially for like neurodivergent people or anybody who sort of lives outside what mainstream media would like tell a story about. When fans get our hands on it, inevitably we bring ourselves to it. And that can be a space for exploring those kinds of things through the subtext of the work and then our shared experience. So that's why I love fandom.
Well, I think just the term shared experience like locks it in so much because it's like this is why, in theater and in film we say representation matters because it's like it's very easy to see yourself in things that reflect your experience. So like I remember, recently watching Everything Everywhere All at Once and being like, oh, damn, I'm Joy, like slash Jobu Tapaki, because I was
Mm-hmm.
like, some of the things that Michelle Yeoh was saying to her, I was like, damn, my mom has said that to me,
Mm-hmm.
like word for word, like almost verbatim.
Yeah.
And like, so, when you see yourself in something, it becomes very like meaningful. And so, I think about the fandoms I'm grown up in, and it's always like, oh yeah, like I see reflections of myself there, and I feel seen, and I feel presented, and I feel represented, and I think that's why we attach to certain media the way we do.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely true.
It's also great that because then you find this resonance, then you find other people who resonated with similar, not necessarily congruent ways. then you go, oh man, like that really hooked me in these moments. Like this one line really like kind of changed my world. And someone goes, oh my God, me too. And then you have that moment of connection. And it's like, okay, I understand something about you. It may not, again, may not be congruent to my experiences, but if we both resonate with this one moment, then I think there's a shared understanding of it. Or maybe we understand it completely differently, and that's also fun to unpack.
Yeah, I think that that is also a sort of aspect of fandom that I think is interesting, is that it is really like all types can be in fandom too, and people walk
Hmm.
into it with very different interpretations of things, where sometimes someone will say something, will be like, did we watch the same thing? But it's still a valid experience of the thing, it's just sort of different.
Hmm.
So you recently started a podcast called Between Two Gays, and the first
Yeah.
episode covered a range of topics. But one of them that I thought was particularly interesting and wanted to sort of dive into further was the commodification of nostalgia, and the ways
Mm.
in which a lot of major studios and such prioritize sort of nostalgia bait projects over new works, to the hindrance of the creation of new works. What implications do you see trickling down from this sort of big level, like we just keep making sequels, we just keep making reboots, into fandom spaces or even the art spaces that you inhabit?
So I think with the fandom spaces, I think one of the things we had talked about before the MCU, right, both here and on Between Two Gays, it's like I was really engaged in it up until like post Endgame.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that as a result, maybe it's the algorithm or maybe it's less creators, but there are fewer and fewer people creating works that resonate with the later stuff. There was like so much, Stucky fan fiction. There was so
Yeah.
much like, here's Clint, Natasha, I want to say Anthony Mackie, but like,
Falcon,
and
Sam
then Bucky
Wilson.
Bar, Sam, thank you. It's
Yep.
like Clint, Sam, Natasha, Bucky, Steve, polycule
Yeah.
fiction, right? Like,
Thor likes Pop Tarts.
Thor likes Pop Tarts, and so I think one of the things that happened is I feel like Endgame should have actually just been the end of it. They didn't really
Mm-hmm.
need to set up anything beyond that. And like it keeps going back to the same thing and the same thing. And I'm like, I feel like the formula is the same every time and I'm not enjoying them as much anymore. Like, and I don't know what it is because it's not like I'm not enjoying Marvel. Like I'm looking at like Gail Simone's run of Uncanny X-Men, and it's so fresh and delightful in the comic form that I'm like, oh, this is really exciting actually. And so like it's not just that they're going back to the same old properties and it's this they're doing the same thing with it over and over.
Right.
Like I think a great example is what is it, the Beauty and the Beast remake people
Yeah.
are talking about recently, where it's like you don't watch that to rewatch it the way you watch the original. Like I rewatched the original a bunch of times,
Mm-hmm.
the animation. I don't feel the same way about the remake because I didn't even go to engage with it because I'm like, I already know this story
Right.
and you're just remaking it. You're capitalizing on the fact that I liked this as a kid. And so then it's like, I think about like anytime they try to capitalize on the nostalgia, I'm like, I think you're doing this for the money.
Yep.
And it's also, I have talked a little bit about like sort of in the capitalist hellscape in which we exist.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually a big kibosh and on our creativity. It is like we are in such a suppressed place as a society that it is impossible for us to think creatively for a solution to the future. And so we keep clinging to the comforts that we know. So when you go back to them like, oh, I already know this like piece of media, I understand it, it's comfortable, I'm not going to be surprised by it. But then there is no longer the excitement of a new piece of art,
Right.
unless you do something different with it. And so the rehashing on the nostalgia over and over again, it's because it makes money because people will spend money on it. And I think it creates this very awful cycle where it's like we'll spend money on the nostalgia, so they'll remake it. We'll spend money on that, so they'll remake it. And then a new property comes along and people go, oh, I don't know about that. So they don't spend their money on it. Or, and this is where, because I have a lot of bad faith for these companies, where it's like they're not marketing as well on purpose
Oh yeah.
so they can continue to rehash the nostalgia because that's where the money is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it keeps us in this tamped down place where we are unable to visualize, a brighter future for ourselves. So we just cling to the things of our past over and over. And then on top of it, you have the like conservative takedown machine on social media spaces where it's like, looking at Marvel, I thought X-Men 97 was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
but people really were like, I hate this. It's so woke. Ah. And I was like, well, I mean, like, the person saying the most radical stuff is an old Jew,
Right.
like, and it's incredibly poignant for the times in which we live. So of course
Mm-hmm.
you hate it because you're being directly called out by a piece of media that you adored, presumably.
Right.
And so, but I think a lot about nostalgia culture because it's like, I think in theater, it's always like, let's do another Shakespeare because, you don't have to pay for the rights.
Right.
But it's like, here's my twist on a the Tale of Two Cities. Not Tale of Two, that's Dickens. Here's my
Close enough.
here's my twist on Winter's Tale. Here's
Right.
my take on Romeo and Juliet. And it's like it's the same story.
Right.
And I watched the Daniel Craig production of Mackers on Broadway a couple years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the freshest part about it was that they approached it from a really horror aspect.
Oh.
Like they'd used a lot of elements from horror for the
Mm-hmm.
ghost stuff, whereas opposed to being like, look at this spooky special effect. It was like, oh, look, this person is just sitting here when they're not supposed to be. It was
Mm.
creepy. It
Yeah.
was it was ominous. And then on top of it, the witches were all making soup all the time. Like all their magic was like gravy based, which was delightful,
I love the
you
idea of
know?
gravy-based magic. That sounds actually
Well,
really
because like
fun.
the bubble bubble toil and trouble
Right.
dramaturgically is all ingredients for soup.
Right.
And so I think they took that and expanded upon it in a really fun way.
Mm-hmm.
So all their magic was like drinking soup or gravy, and
Right.
it was like, and they were all like down home Southern cooks, which was like really kind of delightful.
Yeah.
But then otherwise, it didn't really gel with the production at all. It was just a choice that was made. But so like again, like we'll go see the same Shakespeare over and over, knowing how every story ends. And because it's like at that point, it's like, well, what is your interpretation of this? What are you saying with this piece?
Right.
And I think that's where the remakes suffer because it's like they're not saying anything new or they're not saying anything poignant. They're just remaking it for the sake of remaking it. And also, I think a little bit to like keep the intellectual property on lockdown
Oh, for sure, that's
before it
part of
enters
it.
public domain,
Yeah, there's a
So
reason they did Snow White when they did as a
yeah,
remake. Yeah. Like
every time.
I think you make a lot of really good points there, and I think the thing that really worries me or that I am concerned about is that fandom really does rely on at least something new coming along and
Mhm.
like injecting a little bit of new something into the universe to play with, right? Like we can and do, and there are plenty of fandoms that have existed for literal decades, sort of
Mhm.
play around in the same sandbox for years and years, but those fandoms do slow down and they become less engaged with over time, and eventually they are lost to time. And the fact that we keep doing all these like reboots and sequels and whatever, like it's not giving useful stuff for fandom to play with. It's just
Yeah.
rehashing the same thing. Like no one's writing fanfic about, to your point earlier, where it's like when the first set of Marvel movies came out, there was a sort of giant fandom explosion in especially fan fiction. The for Avengers
Mhm.
Tower Fix of 2012 slapped.
So hard.
So good. And that just doesn't happen anymore because all those characters are dead, first of all. And
Yeah.
second of all, like the characters that have been brought into the fold now, I think in many ways have been set up to fail because they're bringing in someone like Anthony Mackie to play the new Captain America and giving him probably the worst case scenario in terms of marketing, in terms of including Sabra as a character and inciting a lot of boycotts of the film. I personally picketed that film. So when they were filming because they broke SAG-AFTRA,
Of course they did,
of
right?
course they did, right? So like they're setting these people up for failure, and it does tend to be as they start to diversify their casts, they set these people up for failure. And fandom
Every time.
doesn't every time, and then fandom doesn't latch onto it.
Hmm.
And it's just not great. Is where I land with that. It's all kind of bad.
It's interesting because I think the most recent fandoms that I have been latched onto are one very old and one relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
Like the old one, fascinatingly, is Magic the Gathering,
Oh yeah,
uh, because that's been around forever.
yeah.
And it's got this deep, detailed history. And there's this like sort of ongoing friction right now because they have what some people call the Fortnitification of it. They're
Mm.
just like bringing all these other properties into it to boost sales and get new players in, which is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but like not for a lot of old seasoned players who are like, I don't like, what is it coming out? as of this recording, is like a SpongeBob SquarePants secret layer coming out soon, and I'm personally not interested in that because it doesn't
Yeah.
quite feel like magic to me. But some people are like really excited for it, and I don't want to yuck their yum, you know?
Right.
It's just not for me. And I can do that and be like, well, that set is not for me, but I'm excited. What they're also doing simultaneously is they have returned to one of their old planes that was very Asian inspired,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that was very a little bit Orientalist the first time it came out, but with some cultural competency since. The way that they have approached the art and the storytelling and the way they both lead into the mechanics of the game is like really stunning, actually. Like they did a couple sets last year that a lot of people weren't super excited about because the storytelling I also feel like was set up for failure
Mm.
personally, but with this set, they have put, it feels like a lot of love into it, a lot of care. And the story, I'm reading the story as it unfolds like a serial right now, episodically, and just like excited for every release to be like, what am I going to learn today about this world that I didn't know before?
Right.
And I get to visit characters whom I have met throughout the series who are popping back up, you know, and then like reading it through, I'm like, oh my God, this character is so autistic coded in a way I didn't realize before. But now I'm like, they've really kind of not leaned into it in a bad way, but they're really playing up the fact that she just does not get the social cues and she realizes it and she feels embarrassed by it, you know, and then but it's like, but we have pressing things to talk about, you know, so like the way they're bringing a fresh light to these characters that I had not really felt before, I'm very excited by.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're meeting new characters and they're introducing side stories that really focus on the cultures of each of these clans that you're meeting. So like you really, it feels like returning home almost to like an old set. And so I'm very excited for that. And it's like, so I have struggles with how they keep pulling in outside fandoms, as it were, to like sort of bolster their revenue
Yeah.
because I think they have such a beautiful world and such a beautiful story to continue to focus on. And when they put the time and effort into it, it really sings. And then the newer fandom I've been relatively engaged with is the Locked Tomb trilogy,
Oh.
with the fourth book coming out soon. Like, I read the books and I was like, where is the fan art? Where is the fan fiction? Like, show me immediately. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't draw particularly well. I'd love to. Otherwise, I'd be drawing Locked Tomb fanfic. I'd be drawing fan art. I'd be drawing a lot. I'd be writing fan fiction, but the way it is told out, I don't want to like what is it? Not sully, but like I don't want to set myself up for expectations because I want the series to end before I consider even writing fan fiction.
Yeah. I know that feeling. I've been there too.
Yeah, because it's like I don't want to temper my expectations with my own self-inserted narratives. I
Right.
want to see what the author does to finish. But that's the dramaturg in me now, sort of tamping on my desire to write fan fiction. But I will consume it because I love people's theories.
Yeah.
But yeah, Locked Tomb fandom, the Thames and Yor lesbian necromancers in space sort
Mm.
of deal. It's really it's some people find it a little too like memey and mimetic, but like I actually very much enjoy it. Like because underneath the memes and mimeticness of it, there's some really beautiful, incredibly lesbianic sentiment. And like one of the things I found really refreshing about it is that like I think every character in that series is a lesbian except for God. Like God is like a spurned bisexual, but like
That's
everyone
correct.
else, even the men are like lesbians because they all love women so
Mm-hmm.
much. Like you can like it's so I don't know how to explain it, but it's like even the like some of the worst people you know in the books, they are just terrible, terrible people. And you're like, I still love these women. I still adore them, no matter how terrible they are.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it was just really written from this place of each character gets this really love and attention that the author puts into them.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so because the author put so much love into these characters, and it's like everything they say or don't say or that's described about them from the POV characters of each book, I'm like, oh, I might not personally like this character, but I love them.
That's amazing. So is this
Mhm.
a novel or a graphic novel? Like, tell me more.
It's a series of novels. The third one got split into two, so we're still waiting for the fourth one.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, it is. I mean, it's probably one of my favorite series is out right now, and it's like a fandom that I engage with because when I read it, I have a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And like half the fun is like, what does that mean, right? Because the author does not hold your hand.
Ooh.
Tamsin Muir is just like, I'm gonna say a thing, and it might be relevant by the end of the book if you're lucky, or it might be relevant in the next book, you know? And
Who's
so
to
like
say?
when I went back and read it through, like every time I've read it through now, which is probably I've done like 3 read-throughs of it, it's like, oh, I know so much more about the world, and every time I go back to the first book, I'm like, oh, that thing that confused me makes perfect sense now. Because it made perfect sense to the characters at the time, but to me it was abstruse. I didn't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And now going back with like future knowledge or more deeper understanding of the world, I'm like, oh, that was actually a perfectly reasonable thing to say or do in that moment, you know?
Right.
And it was really fun reading it and pinging my friend who suggested it to me, just being like, I have a theory. I think it's this. And they go, wow, what a theory, you know? And I feel like maybe half the time I was spot on and the other half the time I was wildly off. So like I had a lot of fun reading that series. So I would consider myself part of the fandom because I actively engage in it. I actively engage in sort of the tinfoil hat conspiracy theories of like, I bet this is gonna happen. And so that's an area where I feel really excited to be a fan. And also because I've noticed that the fans with which I engage are also like not toxic. I'm sure there is a toxic element to
Mm-hmm.
many of the fandoms I've been a part of, but it's like I just haven't encountered it here yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like the most I would say the most like worst fights I've seen are like you ship these two? Why? Right?
Yeah.
And that's it. There's no like because I feel like everyone who reads that series and who's enjoyed the series is like some level of queer.
Right.
Whereas, with when I've engaged with things like Star Wars, I certainly encounter people with very different political views than mine, and those are
Sure.
often times where I'm like, huh, I don't think we watch the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
that same thing. And I was just thinking as recently as well about, how we are all sort of protagonists. And so we will always see ourselves in the protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
But like years ago, I think when Django Unchained came out, I was like, there's a lot of people right now who are like, yeah, I'm Django. And I'm like, well, no, actually, you're Leo DiCaprio. You're
Yeah.
the slave owner.
Right.
But you still see yourself in the underdog
Mm-hmm.
because that is the narrative you have built up about yourself internally. And so I think a lot, I was thinking about what is it? An anime. I was thinking about isekai anime too,
Mm-hmm.
where I was like, there is something about it whenever I watch one, and I get these like very incel-y vibes about them, and I cannot
Mm.
quite pinpoint it outside of their relationship to women,
Mm.
specifically the female characters. Like the relationship to women in the shows, combined with like their relationship to the authority of the world and how they feel wronged by it typically, I'm like, there's something very incel coded about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like those are fandoms I sort of instinctually avoid because I'm like, I feel
Yeah.
like I know. You know what's a great example if we're still talking Marvel? The Punisher.
Oh yeah. I'm not super familiar, I'll be honest with you, but I can understand just from my brief knowledge why that would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, like I've seen so many, cops and Thin Blue Line folks being like, "Yeah, the Punisher," and I'm
Yeah.
sitting there being like, "The Punisher would hate you, and you would
Right.
hate the Punisher."
Mm-hmm.
But you also, it's telling to me that you think that the lesson is be above the law, have guns, take justice into your own hands. But you're a trained officer of a
Right.
law enforcement arm. That is not the thing you should be doing at
Right.
all. And that, honestly, if you did that, the Punisher would hate you
Right.
because you would be corrupt. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think, but it's like cool male power fantasy guy with lots of guns solves problems by shooting things, right?
Yeah.
And then, you go back to the rest of Marvel, and it's like the Punisher is not well liked because he kills people straight up, whereas the others are like, we're trying to save them,
Right.
right? So,
Yeah.
so it's always really fascinating to me when people latch onto the Punisher, especially people in law enforcement, because I'm like, no, that's not what I want you to latch onto.
Right. I have been thinking about that a lot recently because music is a big part of my life, specifically rock music.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people who listen to rock music do not understand that they are the machine we are raging against. I was like,
Oh
y'all,
boy.
the people who go to Green Day concerts and get offended when he starts no Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA, which he's been
Yeah.
chanting for 20 fucking years. It used to be Bush. Like, what did you think
Mhm.
American Idiot was about? Like, in what world do you think that, like, these people are are on the conservative bent. Like that it doesn't track. Like the we can have as many interpretations of art as we want. Some of them do not track, and that just is one of them that doesn't.
Yeah, and I think it is always really telling when someone force slams it in such a way that that makes it track for them.
Mm-hmm.
Being like, yeah, I'm anti-establishment, therefore Green Day is anti-establishment. And I was like, sure, that is a very thin thread to latch onto if you ignore 99% of what they say.
Right. If you
They're
forget
also,
how queer they are, because almost all of
yeah,
them are queer, and the history of them literally beating the shit out of like asshole dudes at their shows. Like
mm-hmm.
back in the day, they
And
used to drop kick people in their crowds.
yeah, but it's like it takes such a cognitive, like a willful cognitive dissonance and such a willful mental gymnastics to be like, this thing that I like is condoning my lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't, that's a stretch there, buddy. If you had a dramaturg in your life, maybe they would have
Right.
pointed that out to you.
Yeah. I
But, I've also harped on and on about the death of critical thinking and media literacy, and so that's another part of it as well.
totally. I think it also loops back around a little bit to like what you're forced to do as an artist when you're making art in a capitalistic hellscape and like the ways
Mm,
in which capital requires certain like things of art
mm-hmm.
makers. And because things have to be coded to be marketable, if you are not able to outright say the thing you want to say, then people can then twist it to mean something that you did not intend or that maybe you did intend but couldn't say. Like there's that sort of brush of everyone can this needs to be palatable, therefore it is now palatable
Hmm.
to the folks that are going to interpret it in a hurtful or otherwise not constructive way.
Yeah. And it's that, again, palatability is such a fascinating thing for art because I think my favorite pieces of art, like art with a capital A art, are like not necessarily palatable. They
Mm-hmm.
are, in fact, divisive. Uh, but when it comes to like most of the things that have developed fandoms, they are, I guess, not universally, but very widely accepted. Like, I think about how they're, what was it? The Steven Universe fandom was a big one. The Avatar Last Airbender fandom, the Avatar James Cameron fandom. Like, there are so many things that are people of all stripes can latch onto, and I do find that beautiful. Even if I disagree with their politics, I do find it beautiful that they can latch onto something. The part I don't find beautiful is then they would go and, try to control that art,
Mm-hmm.
by saying like, hey, you can't get grant funding if it promotes woke ideology. And I'm like, but what does that mean actually? What does
Right.
it mean actually?
Yeah.
Does it mean, and so one of my more interesting criticisms for people who complied in advance with that NAA order are like, I hope you enjoy making hand-picked art for the Trump administration. I hope it
Truly.
nourishes you.
Yeah. Well, there's also we could go off on this, but there's also a reason that folks of that ilk latch on to the art that they latch on to, and it's because it's good.
Yeah.
And I hate to, yuck anyone's yum here, but a lot of more explicitly conservative stuff is lambasted and it's held to be bad art because it is
Hmm.
like it does take a certain amount of empathy to tell a story and tell it well. And in my personal opinion, the conservative worldview lacks empathy.
It does, very much so. In favor of, I think, more surface level kindness,
Mm-hmm.
like sort of like decency, quote unquote, but
Right.
it feels facade to me personally. It feels like you must appear to be good as opposed to actually being good.
Definitely.
Whereas I think empathy asks us to get into the nitty gritty of what does it mean to actually do good or be good.
Right.
Not to say that there aren't people on the left and liberals who
Oh,
are
sure.
not all in that same world, but it's like I've noticed it seems to be a bit more prevalent with my conservative friends.
Yeah.
And like, what was the other thing? Oh, I wanted to take a moment to plug my friend's podcast, The Worst of All Possible Worlds, where they actually dissect Christian media.
Ooh.
They go through one of their series is on Wit's Endless Summer, which was like a sort of like not quite Bible studies, but they're talking about like, what are good Christian conservative values, and they break down how all the episodes are A, not good, B, problematic, but also C, like weirdly hilarious as a result if you look at it from our lens.
Right.
And it's a lot
Interesting.
of like, yeah, it's really the way they break it down is very, very smart and very funny, which makes it very digestible, but
Right.
do recommend any listeners to check that one out because they do some really phenomenal breakdowns and takedowns of Christian media.
Yeah, that is a whole world that I have had. The only exposure I've had to Christian media is VeggieTales, which is probably for the best. I do love VeggieTales. They did get me with their fun little cucumber man. Um,
Of course.
but but yeah, the rest of it, I don't think. I mean, there's a reason it doesn't hit in the mainstream because it's so narrow in a lot of ways.
It's so narrow. There's not a lot of fan art for the VeggieTales crew. There's not a lot of fanfic.
I bet there is,
I
but
bet there is, but you
yeah,
know what I feel like the key component to fan fiction is?
what?
Yearning.
Yeah, you're so
And it's
right.
like, it's a lot of yearning because it's like it's the desire of the author to see this outcome. Like, when Rogue One came out, like I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I ship the hell out of Cassian Andor and Bodhi Rook, but also because I was like, I want to see Diego Luna and Riz
Right.
Ahmed kiss, but
Yeah.
it's also because they're gorgeous. But it's like, for whatever reason, those characters in my head were like romantically linked,
Sure.
and there was no hint of that whatsoever in the show.
Right. Are you
But I was
trying
like,
to tell
these,
me that we don't yearn for Bob the Tomato?
I don't think we yearn for Bob the Tomato, and I'm not king shaming, but
Yeah.
it's like I think there is yearning. So I
Yeah.
watched a lot of like, here's how they all live fanfic, and here's how they all live afterwards.
Yeah.
And so there's the yearning to see a different outcome than what you
Mm-hmm.
got. There's also the yearning to see these characters express an affection for one another. You know, we love our Kikis and our Blorbos so much, and we want to
Sure.
see them, in a little sandbox, and we want to imagine a world for them in which things went differently, which is sort of the premise of fan fiction.
Oh yeah.
And I think, you know what, now that I say that out loud, I feel like the remakes would be so much more interesting if they were fan fiction, actually.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you.
Yeah, that would be so much more interesting if it's like, all right, well, here's my version of Snow White, where Snow White, like the seven dwarves are in a polycule
Right.
and they all like love each other very much. And they're like, we have a daughter now, and
Yeah.
there's a prince trying to smooch her. Don't like this,
Yeah.
like, I don't know, just sort of off the cuff. I think that would be much more interesting than a shot for shot remake, or a live action remake of Snow White.
Right. I'm totally with you. And I think that is where some remake media or some legacy media does sometimes go afield of things. Like I think a lot of the series in the Star Wars world are doing that where they're taking, other stories where they're not following the sort of main trilogy anymore and they're parsing out like what was this like? What
Yeah.
could have happened here? And that is where you can continue to play in the sandbox of a world professionally in a way
Mhm.
that is potentially also like sustainable as a way to keep the actual property like alive in the industry in which it is.
Yeah, well, there's also like I got to thinking about the Final Fantasy VII, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which was a very pinnacle game for me in like middle school, high school, early high school. And like, the story of like maybe being an eco-terrorist is a good thing, right? And
Yeah.
maybe like making corporations not bleed the planet dry for profit is a good thing.
Right.
Like really resonated with me as a
Mm-hmm.
child for some reason. And then
Huh, wonder why.
so when they originally announced that they were remaking the game, I was like excited because I love the game, but I was also like, well, if they just remake the game, that's boring.
Mm-hmm.
And then they didn't just remake it. Like
Mm-hmm.
they did some, without spoiling anything, they did some really beautiful things to expand upon what already existed and simultaneously create something entirely new.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was incredibly exciting and revitalizing. When you go back to a property, like, it's like I want people to mine it for potential, to be
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, there's a story here that resonates with me right now. Like I don't need it to be resonant with everyone. It's like this moment here resonates with me. I want to expand upon this. I want to build something on what's already there. And I think that is the joy of fandom, where it's like you find those resonances and you build upon them and you create something deeper that displays your understanding of the world. I think fandom gets really icky when people are like, no, you need to see it the same way I did.
Right.
And I think it's like, no, we should enjoy the panoply of opinions here
Mm-hmm.
with regards to these characters who exist. People can have their different interpretations and I think it is interesting to hear what they are, even if I disagree. And I
Right.
think part of what makes fandom culture a little funky is like like you can disagree with people, but I don't think people like to be wrong, which
Yeah.
is really weird then about like it's all opinion based and people
Hmm.
are, cherry picking to find what information they have to support their thesis. And then it's like you feel bad because you couldn't defend your viewpoint. I'm like, nah, fam, just let your viewpoint evolve. Or say, yeah, you're probably right. I still like this, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
But like we are so convinced that we need to like dominate everyone into being the most correct that that's where I have to be the king of this fandom,
Mm.
the fan of this fandom. And I'm like, I don't need that in my life. I don't need that energy. I just want to enjoy my media and I want to
Right.
chat with people who also enjoy it.
Isn't that such a reflection of how public discourse happens today too? Like that is really how like news is and how conversations around
Hmm.
current events are. Like fandom does reflect the times in which it lives for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
And we live in very polarized times, which is
deeply.
fascinating
Yeah.
because it's like when I enter conversations, especially doing like anti-racist work, it's like I have to go in there understanding that there's a possibility that my worldview is going to change. That I'm going to leave this experience, even though I'm entering as the quote unquote expert here, I'm going to leave with a new perspective and I'm allowed to change my viewpoints as a result of absorbing new data and new information and gaining a deeper understanding. I can change how I feel about things. But I feel like we're in this world where it's like there are people who are so vehement about being correct
Mm-hmm.
that it's like you are holding on to these outdated, archaic beliefs. And it's like the answer becomes like, why? I think, we look at queerness and the attacks on trans folks on all strata of governmental levels right now. And it's like, why are you so scared of trans people? And like I sit there thinking like, well, they represent a liberation from an oppressive system, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you don't have to adhere to the gender you were assigned, then like what else is possible? And I think there's a lot of fear there where it's like everything I was taught, all the gender roles that I internalized, I have to hold on to because they're all I have, apparently, So
Right.
I'm like, so of course trans people are scary because they represent like coloring outside the lines is okay, that you don't have to adhere to what you were taught.
Mm-hmm.
And that's scary to a lot of people who need that structure to, I don't know, remove like accountability from themselves for the way their life is, I guess.
Definitely. I have
Yeah.
a professor said that to me once where there was a whole thing back in college where I kind of accidentally kicked up a ruckus around the Vagina Monologues by Eve Ensler.
Huh.
It's a long story, but a lot of second wave feminists who, predominantly like older white women came after us pretty hard for talking, like offering critique of that particular play. And I couldn't
Mhm.
really understand why, if you claim to be a feminist, why you would like at the very least see where we were coming from. And my professor, bless her, was like, it's because they've staked their identities on a very particular worldview, and you are saying that it doesn't have to be that way. And they're taking that as a personal critique or a personal
Yeah.
attack on them and not a observation or,
Mhm.
something that, because if you're saying that this thing that they love so much has flaws, then what you're saying to them is that they have flaws. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh. And that has stuck with me for the last, 10 years when having these conversations, because I think it's very true that when people really internalize and personalize something, any critique becomes a attack on the person rather than attack on the thing.
Yeah. And I think that that is endemic to fan culture as a
Mm-hmm.
result, because it's like, I like this TV show. I like this particular character. And then someone comes along and says, well, I find that show really problematic for XYZ reasons. Our initial knee-jerk reaction is be like, therefore you assume I am problematic,
Right.
right? And I totally understand that instinct. I do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, I don't know, we have such a tight, like almost parasocial relationship to these intellectual properties that we're like, any attack on that is an attack on me personally. And I'm like, nah.
Yeah.
Like I just want to engage with this. I want to engage with it. I want to be inspired by it. I want to, have my worldview changed a little bit, but I at no point have staked so much of my personality on a single thing that, or, on anything. I have staked my personality on me personally.
Right.
That it's like you can attack whatever thing I like. The number of times I'm like, I know this movie is bad, but I love this movie. It's Troy, right?
Right.
Like, Troy is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
it's like wrong. It's not a good movie. I love that movie, right?
Yeah.
And it's like anytime someone says Troy sucks, I'm like, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Right? I still love it though,
Yeah.
right?
I have a number of things that I'm exactly the same way about, where I was like, oh no, it's not good.
Yeah, but I love it.
I'm not arguing that it's good. In fact, it's bad, and I can tell you all the ways it's bad.
Yeah, and I just think that's healthier
Yeah.
than like being like, oh, well, I've made this, XYZ fandom my entire personality.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore any attack on it is attack on me, an ad hoc attack on me. And I'm like, nah.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you go back to being an interesting artist, you have to live an interesting life. And so like I feel like that's somehow connected where it's like, well, you haven't maybe invested as much into other assets of other facets of your personality and yourself. Like, what do you like aside from this thing?
Yeah.
So, with all things, I think there should be a good balance with how one engages with fandom. And I think like, well, I mean, I love the block button now, so it's like anytime someone just has an opinion I don't like, I'm like, cool, I'm just not gonna read it actually.
Mm-hmm.
Unless I want my opinion to be challenged,
Sure.
which is sometimes I want.
Yeah. I love the block button. I'm a huge blocker. Um,
Yeah. Oh, I
I
love the
have
block
been
button.
since the olden days of the internet. I do think that some of what we're talking about also loops back around, all the way back around to the point you were making about people not having time or being so
Mm.
beat down that, like, if all you have is an investment in, it's like you go to work and then you come home and all you have time for is to be invested in this one thing. And that one thing is, Star Wars, whatever it is,
Yeah.
then yeah, of course you're going to be like, I don't have anything else going for me because I don't have time to visit my family. I don't have time to be in a club. I don't have time to
Yeah.
like participate in society the other ways because I'm working 2 jobs or 3 jobs or whatever it is. So yeah, it becomes very, very cyclical where it's like it is intensified. The attachment to the things that we do have is intensified because you don't have the bandwidth for other things.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, universal basic income win, rent cancellation win, right? Like
Totally. Debt cancellation win.
that cancellation win. I mean, I think a lot about, when 2020 hit and we were all locked down. I think so much about how society has continually devalued art,
Mm-hmm.
continually devalued it. And then when we had nothing else to do, we all turned to art. Like
Right.
we all immediately was like, well, let's consume this media. Let's play this game.
Mm-hmm.
Let's all play Among Us together. Let's all group watch a TV show we like together. Like we all turn to it because I think as humans we need it. We need that enrichment the way tigers need pumpkins filled with meat, right? Like
Totally.
and so it's always fascinating to me where it's like I have such a conspiracy foil hat for it where it's like they have devalued art so much that it's like making it easier for AI art to exist
Mm-hmm.
because there it is, like the free cheap solution.
Yeah.
And it's like it's not good,
No.
but like it's being pushed so hard because it's like, well, what if you could just create the thing instantly?
Right.
While vaporizing the environment, but what if you could just create it instantly? And I think I've been thinking a lot about it, how like AI art is like such a golden goose vehicle for people who have wanted to live a creative life and now have access to it for the first time. Because I looked at a lot of the defense of it and people were like, it's art, it's accessibility
Mm-hmm.
for people who didn't have the time or desire to get training in a thing. It's evening the playing field. And I'm like, it shouldn't be a playing field.
Right.
It shouldn't be a field. What you're creating is a soulless facsimile.
Right.
And like that's not even. It might look good at a glance, but
Yeah.
but it's also like it's so ethically wrong to me that you're just stealing the work of everyone else around you and being like, I'm on even footing. I'm like, nah, fam, do the work actually.
Yeah.
There is praxis and there is struggle to art,
Yeah.
there's the joy of overcoming and there's the joy of exertion.
Well, and AI also completely skirts the pesky humanness of it all, where someone like you or I, or, the queer artists in history might bring queerness into the work, right? Or bring themselves in a way that is not controllable. If, the
Yeah.
powers that be can make AI art and, airbrush out the queerness or airbrush out any critique of the system, then
Yeah.
they don't even have to deal with all of us sneaking in the queer Disney villains, you know,
Right.
and like making that happen.
But it's also there's a meme recently that was perfect where it's like the a computer can never be horny, therefore a computer can never make art, right? And I was
Totally.
like, okay, maybe horny is not quite correct, but I think it goes back to the yearning, right?
Oh
I
yeah.
think it's all about the yearning.
Mm-hmm.
And a computer currently, maybe it can one day, I don't know, but it can't yearn. And so it's like, you know what I think a lot is now problematic fandom that I enjoyed was Firefly, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
I think a lot about the line. It's like this was made by someone who really yearned to see, who longed to see a swan. I just
Mm-hmm.
think about that line a lot because I'm like, actually, that is the most artistically beautiful thing to me. That
Mm-hmm.
someone really longed to see a thing, so they created it, you
Yeah.
know? And it might not be good, but they put the labor into the creation of it. And it's like, give me that sad little duck or that sad little swan. Like, we talk about memes. I'm like, give me the bad Photoshop. I'll take that 100 times over. I'll take an AI generated meme.
Yeah.
Write me a cringy poem. Write it to me, actually. I will love it so much more than something you told your computer to write for me that's flawless. Because it's devoid of the humanity and it's devoid of the you-ness of the art.
Mm-hmm.
Like every time I see AI art, anytime I see something like it's just so generic. And I'm like,
Yes.
this is truly the middle road of everything I have ever seen in my life. And it's perfectly in the middle, and that's not exciting for me.
Yep. And it has 7 fingers for no
Yeah,
reason.
too many fingers, or
Yeah.
like the hair melts into the clothes, and I'm
Yeah.
like, that's weird.
There's an extra shoulder somewhere, and you're like, that's not attached
I'm
to a person.
not here for it.
Yeah. No, it's bad. I also think that like the devaluation of art is very real, and also I think to an extent we've lost the joy of like hobbies.
Mm,
And fandom is all hobbies, right? Like we
it's
all,
all hobbies.
yeah, like it's by nature a thing you do for fun and not for profit. But I think a lot of people who maybe don't engage in fandom or don't engage in art in a hobbyist way really like feel entitled to be like, well, then I'll just make it on the computer because I'll use AI and then whatever. It's like, no, pick up a hobby.
Yeah,
Like what you actually want is to create. And you don't have to be a professional to do that. Like,
yeah.
go get a
The,
stupid sketchbook or something and just like do it, you know? Like,
it's so fun.
yeah. And it will be bad. And that's okay because it's a
Mhm.
hobby. Who cares?
But yeah, again, with the, people want to be seen and they don't want to be seen as bad at a thing.
Right.
People want to be competent, and so I get that. But the road to competence is filled with mistakes.
Yeah. I
And I think
also
the other part of it, this might be a little bit of a hot take, but it's like, I feel like content creation was a mistake.
I was just going to kind of go down that path because I think a lot about when Bo Burnham basically said something along the lines of like, everyone is performing all the time and it's doing permanent damage to us all. Like it was the worst thing that we ever did was create a performance of ourselves.
Yeah. And it's also like, but it comes to the fact that it's like, you can't have a hobby anymore. You
Yep.
have to monetize it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think about how many actual play streams of D&D popped up around the time of when Critical Role became really popular.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot about, people who engage in a hobby, and no shame to the people who do it, of course, because I understand the drive to, but like I look at fandoms, I look at Magic the Gathering, I look at D&D, and suddenly everyone's a content creator because they need to make money off of it.
Right.
And it's also like the job market is terrible, so I don't blame them trying
Of
to
course.
monetize it because it's like, do something you love, and I get it.
Right.
But like I think there's such a toxic relationship between products and content creators.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this bugs me in a way that I haven't fully articulated. It's like streamers, like all power to my friends who stream, and I love watching my friends stream video games and stuff like that. But I'm like, my critical thinking question is always who benefits from this? Who benefits?
Right.
And it's like, well, the company who hosts the streamers and the company of the games you're playing, And like I'm just like something about this in like the very back of my heart feels wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like we should be able to just enjoy things without needing to monetize it also.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I think it helps that I come from a lot of hobbies that cannot be monetized. Like it's not,
Yeah.
you can't sell your fan fiction. Don't sell your fan fiction.
Don't.
That kind of stuff. But also like I've been teaching myself how to play the ukulele so I can go sing protest songs. um, on
Yeah.
like picket lines and stuff, which is super fun. No one's gonna pay me to do that, and that's totally fine. I do it just because I like it, you know. And I think
Yeah.
there is real value in that, in doing a thing for the sake of doing it. Um, yeah, I agree with you. I think specifically sort of like not that, because like content can be art, but not all content is art.
Yeah, agreed.
And the content that is content for content's sake, I think is the mistake.
Yeah. It's also like there's content and then there's like what feels like shill content. And I say
Yeah.
shill lovingly. I think it's the first word that comes to mind, but it's like you are you are almost free advertising for a company that is not valuing your work.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what I'm getting at too. Is the like
Yeah.
the people who do it, but they're not engaging with it critically in some way, or they're not riffing on it. They're not doing like they're just shilling is the best way to put it. And then
Yeah.
interspersed with a couple of Audible ads to get that sweet sweet Amazon money. And it's like, yeah, of course this is bad for the soul. It's all a
Yeah.
corporation thing.
And I think again those creators are again so suppressed by the need to make money
Yeah. Oh,
that
for sure.
like because there's a few creators whom I won't name whom I think could be really incredible artists if they just got, paid to do art.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it's like if you had and like, but I also like this goes to my deeper yearning that it's like no one should be paid for anything, in my opinion,
Right.
right? Like apparently I'm a hyper radical for thinking that just money shouldn't exist, right? And that,
Yeah.
like we shouldn't have jobs because we shouldn't need to work jobs.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so like I think that's like I want more people to engage in fandom because it feels a little bit like it's a dying thing now because it's like what are like let me ask you like what are some of the more recent fandoms you've engaged with or have heard of?
Sure. So the biggest one that I was in, I would say I've chilled out a little bit on it, mostly because of actor stuff. But Stranger Things was one of the most recent ones where I
Mm-hmm.
got really attached to Steve Harrington and Eddie Munson as a pair.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, Eddie's gay as shit. So, and Steve Harrington, beautiful, himbo bisexual. I love him. Uh,
Yeah.
so that was the one of the ones that I came into sort of recently. But I think again with like they just have dragged it out way too long, and they should just tell the fucking story and be done with it. Like they keep extending it and like delaying, and they're trying to turn these into like films, and I'm like, no one wants that. Just
Yeah.
fucking tell the story. Stop.
Hmm.
Um, I was a little bit into Our Flag Means Death for a little bit.
Oh yeah, yeah. I really liked it and then I stopped really liking Taika Waititi.
Yeah, that happens to me a lot where I'm like, I like this. Oh, bummer.
Yeah.
So,
I think he's too enamored with himself.
oh yeah,
And I was like, I like really liked your work, but now it's like, I don't know. It feels so smarmy.
yeah. There's an ego that bleeds through. That's like,
Yeah.
I don't
And
know.
I really don't enjoy it anymore.
I wish I knew less about celebrities in general.
Yeah.
There's a lot that I'm like, I know so many things against my will, and
Well,
frankly, it ruins it. So
I
stop.
mean, it's the Bo Burnham have a little bit of everything all of the time, right? Like we just
Yeah.
can't enjoy things without knowing all the stuff behind it anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's value. Like, I think we live in a world where everyone feels like they constantly have to be on their soapbox, talking about every single thought that they've ever had, and because that's content or whatever. I'm like,
Hmm.
actually, I really, really respect the people who like put art out into the world and then kind of just like let it speak for itself and let it do what it's
Yeah.
gonna do. I think that takes a lot of courage in this day and age, and it also is like a harder thing to do, especially because people get pushed to do like press junkets and interviews and whatever. And it's like,
Truly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's really something to somebody being like, nope, here's my art. It says what it says. And,
Hmm.
chat later. Bye.
I I mean, therein I also have a really fascinating relationship too, because I think then I feel like as long as they're like, that's my art and this is what it says, as opposed to, I think we both know those artists who are like, oh, you think that's what my art says? It does. It says that.
Oh,
Who
yeah.
like haven't actually put any work behind it. They just
Mm-hmm.
sort of expressed a thought
Yeah.
and just let and are like, will kind of like relish in everyone having different opinions about it without having like a thing behind it. I feel
Right.
some kind of way about it, and I just can't
Yeah.
explain it terribly well.
Yeah, I think that is a slightly different thing. I think some people do. The thing that I can respect is I'm thinking, I'm actually, this is going to shock regular listeners of the podcast. I'm a little frustrated with Hosier right now, the artist
Oh,
Hosier,
yeah, yeah.
because I feel like we've gotten a little bit too much saturation of him recently. And he was sort of
Mm,
notorious for like, I drop an album, the album is what it is. I will do my tour cycle, I will do my press, and then I'm going back to like Ireland and I'm going to write the next one. Like, leave me alone. And I think he might be working with like new management, or his management company finally got to him or whatever. And he's doing a lot more like promos and shit. I'm like, mm. But that is sort of more the thing that I'm interested in with someone who has a very clear point of view in their artwork, right? Like Hosier's albums are
yeah.
really, really artistically deep, and he's offering a lot. He's not going to sit there and be like, like when somebody comes up to him and is like, "Oh, is this about like Dante's Inferno?" He's like, "Yeah, cool." Like, no, like there's 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 actual depth there that he put there intentionally to parse with, but
Yeah.
he's also not going to tell you how to interpret it, like ultimately.
Right.
And I think that is a slightly different thing than what you're pinpointing, which is also a thing where people really do kind of make this like vacuous art intentionally because they know that it will land. And there
Yeah.
isn't actually depth there, but they've put the sort of trappings of it so other people can interpret it that way. And that's gross.
Yeah. And I just want art that says things.
Yeah. And that's can sometimes be a problem
Mm-hmm.
for, the capitalist system, because sometimes what it has to say they don't like. So,
Right. Or it's not marketable.
yeah, or you can't sell it. You can't put it on a t-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you do, everybody's going to be like, actually, I'm not going
I
to buy
mean,
that
like,
t-shirt.
I'm from Asia. Like, they put a lot of stuff on t-shirts in Asia.
True.
In, like Malaysia, China, Japan. There's a lot of American phrases that are on t-shirts that I'm like, that's not a thing, but now it is.
Yeah. I more meant
You
it's
can
like you
put
can't
anything in
sell.
a t-shirt, I promise.
Yeah. I
So,
sort of more used it as a joke of like, sometimes when the art is too political, you can't sell merch of it, and that makes companies
oh,
mad.
that's right.
Because it's like,
You
well,
know,
we need to be able to make whatever. We have to make sales.
I was thinking about it. I walked by a shop downtown, like one of those touristy shops,
Mm-hmm.
and it had a t-shirt up hanging there that said like "Daddy's Little Meatball," and it was like, what the hell?
Wait, I want that. That's incredible. That's so weird.
Yeah,
Love it.
and I was like, I would wear that actually.
That is
If they
so
made it in my
funny.
size, I would wear that.
That's funny. Yeah, I love really unhinged stuff like that. I think,
Yeah, give it to me. I will
yeah,
eat it up.
yeah. I'm very easy to appease. So I guess tying it all back together a little bit, do you have sort of like final thoughts on the commercialization and commodification of fandom specifically? I'm talking about the ways in which like a marketing team will sort of intentionally utilize fandom or try to like sort of bait fandom into doing certain things to like suit their agendas. How conventions are more and more expensive and they're more and more trying to like sell you a thing as opposed to conventions to get together with friends and other fans. Like, do you have any sort of thoughts on the actual commodification of fandom itself?
I mean, the big one is that I hate it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that is like I think the most elegant summation is I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the same way that I feel like we shouldn't be monetizing our hobbies, I feel like our hobbies should not be monetizing us.
Yeah.
And it's like again part of that nostalgia cycle too. It's like, isn't your life so miserable? Don't you feel like spending more money on things that bring you joy?
Mm-hmm.
And so like the commodification of a hobby, I think, is just the overall commodification of joy.
Yeah.
It is profiting off of the fact that our lives are miserable and that we're seeking happiness and enrichment from otherwise unenriching and unhappy labor that we perform. So it's like, yeah, why don't you spend, hundreds of dollars to go to this place where you will spend maybe tens of dollars on food, but way too much money on merch that will ultimately, the merch is not the interesting part,
Mm-hmm.
the experience is, but it's like, let's, when I do end up at conventions, I try because I have to ride my little high horse, right? I'm like I gotta buy from some like independent artist who
Right.
is there who like worked to get there. I need to buy something like handcrafted or handmade and like or like lovingly crafted to feel like I've justified a purchase. Like so for instance, like one of the things I look for is this I'll plug them. It's Many Worlds Tavern. I really like their coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever I see them at a con, I'll buy a bag of their stuff because I'm going to take that home with me and I want to enjoy it. And it's not a merch that will sit on my shelf forever. It'll have a use. I will consume it and I will think of my experience at the con each time.
Yeah.
But like that is how I want to engage with it. And so I don't know, I hate the commodification of things because there's a cranky part of me that's like, let me just enjoy a thing.
Yeah.
Like I already have to pay an arm and a leg for all the different streaming services now, right? And it's like, and they're raising the prices again and putting
Mm-hmm.
more ads in with the constant enshittification of it. That it's
Right.
like, I don't, I just want to enjoy things,
Yeah.
which is why, start a podcast with friends because
Mm-hmm.
the main cost is time and energy,
Right.
or play tabletop games because again it's like I've bought the thing, I'm not going to buy more things, but I will
Right.
now expend the time and energy to have an experience with friends
Mm-hmm.
because I think what is it, as part of the Magic the Gathering fandom, people are very fond of saying like Magic is the gathering, right?
That's really cute, actually.
Yeah. And so people are always excited to go to the conventions or
Mm-hmm.
any of the gaming conventions because you're gonna see people, you're gonna jam a game with them, and it might be the most miserable game you've ever played, but you're gonna have fun in a community experience,
Right.
right? Like, and that's the joy of it. And seeing people who, normal, like, what is it like? Hello to like all the queer folks who normally live in my little box that I carry around everywhere. Like, I'm
Right.
seeing you in 3 dimensions. How exciting!
Yeah.
Like, so like the fact that people are commodifying on joy and community bugs me deeply.
Mm-hmm.
It itches in my soul because I'm like, these are basic human things that we've wanted to do since the dawn of time, which is like sit around the fire and ooga booga with one another.
Totally.
Like that's all I want to do now is I want to sit around and ooga booga with people, and now I gotta pay hundreds of dollars just to do that. So yeah, that's my feeling of it. It's like it feels like it is further entrenching me in a capitalist system, making it harder for me to escape because it feels like I must then spend labor to get the money to spend it on a thing,
Totally.
which means I am reliant on my labor to get more money.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who profit off of that labor are the people who are criminally underpaying me.
Right. I am a little careful because I obviously do panels for Comic Cons.
Yeah,
I'm going to one in a couple weeks as a panelist, and I'm very
yeah,
grateful for that opportunity. And I want to be very clear that like cons can be an absolutely wonderful thing. I've just been to enough to know at this point and to see and to be very frustrated, particularly with I think the like heavy focus on buy a $200 3-second photo with this person
hmm,
and like that kind of what feels like a real cash grab for fans
yeah,
that is really like I understand to an extent that they also have costs to cover and like this is part of it is that this is a commercial venture like I'm not denying that I get it and it's always
yeah,
been that like I totally get that Star Wars had merch and all that kind of shit back in the 70s too. This is not necessarily a 2020s thing. But I find it really, I guess one of the, pros of going to Awesome Con, DC, local con, over other cons that I've experienced. There's a real focus on the community panel aspect of it in DC that I really value and wish other cons had. Wish DC would lean
yeah.
more into because like it's getting smaller.
Hmm.
But I think they're like it just really makes me mad that there's such a cost barrier to a thing that should be really like a hobby and fun. And it's very clearly about making money off the back of your love of the thing and not actually giving you a good experience by and large.
Yeah. Well, I think it's telling for Magic the Gathering conventions that most people's favorite part of it is called lobby con, which is just the thing that happens after the con closes in the lobby after hours,
Yeah.
and like as a frequent panelist on conventions as well, like I love the chance to speak about like what we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
to an audience of people,
Yeah.
and I
It's
love the
great.
chance to connect with people in that way. I think it's a lovely experience. And because we are all gathered, what a great place to have an exchange of ideas and those robust conversations. But it's also like, again, we loop back to the very beginning of the podcast where it's like, I love accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
I love when a panel gets approved and I'm like, great, I don't have to pay for a ticket,
Yeah. Us too.
And I'm like,
That's a
I just have to
big
cover
thing.
my travel costs,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that is wonderful. That's how I was able to attend PAX East. Like
Mm-hmm.
I A panel was approved. I went up. I bought my train ticket well in advance. It was a nice 4 hour Amtrak ride for like 20 bucks,
Nice.
and then I
Yeah.
crashed with a friend. And so like my costs were covered and it
Yeah.
was nice and easy. Like I spent some money on meals and that
Right.
was about it. That was my main expenditure.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Similarly, yeah,
damn, what a great experience.
definitely. We do a similar thing with New York Comic Con when we go, and we share a
Yeah.
hotel room. We drive up in my car, so all we're paying is gas and tolls. And then we
Hmm.
bring as much food as we can fit in the car and feed ourselves for the week, other than like one nice dinner out. We'll usually get dim sum. Um,
Yeah.
but we're like, you know what? We're just going to have sandwiches that we made in the hotel room, and we're going to bring the
Yeah.
crock pot and hope they don't confiscate it, and it's going to be great.
Well, next time you're up here, like, let me know because I will show you all the cheap spots.
Yes, please, thank you.
Because, like, that's the joy of New York is like the proliferation of the food scene is really
Mm-hmm.
like you can find whatever it is you're looking for at every price point if you know
Yeah,
where to go. So, like I get my like a $6 breakfast sandwich across the street and it is perfect every time.
incredible. Yeah, that sounds so nice. Well, it feels like a pretty natural moment to ask my favorite question and sort of my last question of the podcast, which is it's a little, I'm going to phrase it a little differently for you, but I'm going to
Ooh,
roll with it
how
anyway.
exciting.
Is there anything that you wish fandom better understood about creation or being a creator, being an artist? And conversely, is there anything you wish other creatives, artists that you know who maybe don't engage with fandom better understood about fandom and fan culture?
Yeah, let's take the first one first, which is to say, I desperately want people in fandoms to understand that the piece of work was not created specifically for you,
Yes.
that it is
Put that on
actually
a
a represent.
t-shirt.
Yeah, I will. But
Mhm.
like, I think and I think that's part of what it is that again, with arts being so devalued and the process of art being so like I feel like people think it is as easy as plugging in some prompts into AI, but it's not. Like
Mhm.
art making is laborious and intensive and has taken oftentimes years of study and training to gain that expertise. And so I'm not interested in making something for anyone. I am interested in making my art for me.
Mhm.
Like my art is selfish in that way. Like I hope it sparks thought or a discussion, but like this is me struggling to express something and this is how it comes out. And so I think that one lens right there would solve a lot of issues in the discourse around fandom, where it's like, well, I don't like it because it was not catered to my tastes. And this
Mhm.
goes for people of every stripe, right?
Yes.
Like every background and every intersection, because it's like, oh, well, I don't want to engage with this material because it does not talk about me specifically. And I'm like, okay, have fun not enriching your life with an alternative viewpoint then.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I would say I really want fandoms to understand about artists. Like the artist is creating something to express themselves. They are not creating it for you personally.
Mhm.
It is an artist is sharing of themselves to do it. And for artists who don't engage with fandom, I think what I want to say is like, I bet you do,
Yeah.
right? Like, I bet you actually do. Because if you've
Yeah.
ever like what is it? I love like cursed images, right? Where like when I saw that haunts my dreams, it's like Kirby with real human feet.
Yep. I think I've seen that actually.
Yeah,
Or
and it
something very
horrifies me.
similar. Yeah.
But it's like it wasn't a fandom artist who created that. It
Mhm.
was just someone who was like, I have this cursed idea and I have to draw it. I have to express it, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's like fandom, I think on paper probably sounds a little cringe, and I
Yeah.
get it, but it's like it's so enriching. It's so enjoyable. It is everything you do as an artist.
Mhm.
And like speaking of fandom, going back to we were talking about a production we worked on together. There is fan art of me farting on someone.
What?
So because it was a children's show,
Yeah.
at least two different children drew fan art of me farting on someone because
Whoa.
that was a moment that happened in the
Yeah.
show. And we got letters from the kids who saw
Uh
the
huh.
show, and it was like,
Oh,
and
yeah.
basically, paraphrase says like my favorite part was Jon Jon because you played violin and you farted on someone, and that was so funny. And I'm like, oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that unlocked something for me because I was like, there is fan art of me.
That's funny.
Someone like took, and I treasure it
Yeah.
deeply because it's like it is a drawing of me farting on another human being, and it is like the most treasured memory I have.
That's
Like, because
amazing.
the show itself, sure, the moment was fun to do, but someone was so enamored by it. So it's like, I think everyone engages with fandom,
Yeah.
whether they admit it or not. So that's what I would say. Don't be so hoity-toity about it. Just engage with it. Enjoy it. Live a
Totally.
little. Life is terrible. Live a little.
Truly. I fully forgot that we had solicited feedback from the children, so I thought this was unprompted.
Oh, no, no, no. It was
Fan art.
solicited, but like,
I was like, how did
yeah.
they find you, Jon Jon? I have so many follow-up questions. No, it was a thing. Okay, that makes more
Yeah, and it
sense.
was posted like Ellen, may her memory be a blessing,
Yeah.
posted it on the
Oh,
the
yeah.
the door,
I forgot
and
she
I
did that
got to see
show.
it. Yeah, I think about her a lot,
Me
and every
too.
time I think about the show, I think about her and vice versa because she was
Mm-hmm.
so integral to my experience there.
Yeah.
And like, but she was so enamored of that child's drawing that she
Mm-hmm.
put it up. She put it up everywhere, and I loved it. I
Yeah.
adored it. Like, because again, like, normally people would be embarrassed about farts, but I
Right.
was like, nah, I'm gonna drink this in. This is my crowning achievement. I will
Mm-hmm.
never, I have peaked as an actor,
You're like,
which is
this
why
is
I don't
it.
do it as much anymore.
Yeah. There you go. I think about
Yeah.
that. So, a different show. It was a sensory-friendly show. One of this is true. This was one of my favorite live reaction experiences of a youth in that theater. There was a different show entirely where there was a scene, it was like a baseball show, and one of the actors had to do a sort of like, he's imagining that he's like hitting the home run and winning the game and running around. And in sensory friendly productions, the audience is welcome to participate however they feel, and in many cases that results in folks speaking at full volume at the actors, and it is incredible. It's one of the
Yeah.
most fun aspects of the show for me because inevitably something very funny happens. And in
Yeah.
this particular show, the actor was like, and he runs around the thing and he hits the baseball and he wins, blah. And a kid in the front row went, who's he talking to? And I thought, damn, if that isn't the most pure distillation of what we're doing here. Like, it's incredible.
The thing is, it's also not just children, and I really wish theater was not so hoity-toity about its
Yeah.
audiences too, because like I did a production of Red Herring,
Mm-hmm.
and I played a Russian spy.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to hide my accent, the character spoke in semaphore because my mistress, my lover, was like, he's mute, so
Mm.
we wouldn't have to speak, and they wouldn't catch the accent.
Right.
And so the next scene that happens is we're in bed, and she's like, why won't you talk to me? And my next line is, I'm mute. I'm saying it as a protest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she says, why won't you talk to me? And these two women in the front row just go, he's mute. And like,
Yep.
because they were so caught up in that moment, I found that so charming.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. There's some actors like, ugh, it throws me off. I'm like, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, great. Like, I'm sure it does. It's very jarring, but like those moments are so human and so resonant. That is one of my fondest memories of that show that happened almost what, like 20 plus years ago now. I still remember that
Wow.
moment
Yeah.
clear as day.
Yeah. What a compliment, honestly.
Truly, that they were so wrapped up that they just blurted out a response.
Yeah. Where it's like, oh, totally just like enraptured of the moment. That's the best.
Yeah.
And
And
that,
that's
yeah.
fandom in a nutshell.
I was
Just
just
being
going to say that.
enraptured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the best. Well, this has been delightful. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I really do really appreciate it. This has been great.
Thank you so much for having me. As you could probably tell, I could talk about art all day long.
Yep.
I could talk about it forever. There's so many things to talk about.
Definitely. Well, you're welcome back anytime. I'm hoping to do these once a month-ish. So, you know.
Yeah, hit me up. I will yap away.
Sounds good. I love yapping. I'm a yapper. It's all good.
I mean, that's why we're on a podcast.
Precisely. Thank you for listening to episode 2 of the Fic List Presents Author's Notes, and thank you to Jon Jon for taking time out of their day to speak with me. You can find Jon Jon on Blue Sky at jonjonjon.bluesky.social or on the podcast Between Two Gays. And a special thank you to our Ko-Fi supporters. We have a number of friends of the pod. They are Danielle, Rose, Leo, Allie, and Dion. If you would like to support what we do here at the Fic List, be it this particular series or our sort of main podcast show, the Fic List, then you can also donate through our Ko-Fi. If you so choose, please don't feel pressured to. All of the funds raised through Ko-Fi go right back into making these shows happen, and we appreciate your support. Thank you to everybody who came out to see us at AwesomeCon DC. It was a huge success. We had so much fun, even though Alan wasn't there. If you are coming to us from there, hi, welcome. It was so good to see you, and hopefully we'll see you another time. That seems to be it in terms of us for cons this year, but you never know. That could change. Who's to say? And also, please do join us on Discord if you are new to the Fic List universe. We have a little Discord. That is a way to be in contact with us directly if you like hanging out with other cool people who are into fandom, fan fiction, that kind of thing. The Fic List on Discord is 18 plus, so please be aware of that. But that is a wonderful way to sort of get more involved with our little podcast community. If you're interested in listening to more of our work, you can find us anywhere podcasts can be found: Spotify, Google, YouTube, all of it. Like, we're everywhere. And we are also on, we also have some videos up on YouTube. If you missed our Comic-Con panels, those are available on our YouTube. And all of this is centrally located at theficlist.com, so you can find us all right there if you're looking for anything. If you or somebody you know are a professional creative and are interested in being interviewed for this series, please reach out, theficlist@gmail.com. I am specifically looking for folks who are professionally creative in some way and open to talking about fandom. So if those two things are true for you, your friend, your family member, please send them my way. Thank you. Have a lovely week. Please take care of yourselves. And until next time, bye, y'all.